Introductions or bios are meant for two places and two places only: libraries and eulogies. That's it. But thank you. I'm very excited to start this off and welcome everyone. Today's topic is really a topic that has been on my mind for many years now, serving as a rabbi. But I must start with a little anecdote about this man who thinks that his wife is having hearing problems. So he goes to the doctor and he says, I think my wife has problems listening to me, hearing me altogether. What do you suggest I do? The doctor said, it's very simple. Before we give her any medication, I want you to give her a few tests. Go home, and as she's standing there on the kitchen counter, just ask her, what's for dinner tonight? If she can't listen to you from 20 feet away, come closer and ask her the same question. If she still can't hear you, come closer, and then we'll see really if she needs strong, heavy medication or not. All right. He listens to the doctor. He goes back to his home. His wife is by the kitchen counter. He stands 20 feet away. What's for dinner tonight, honey? No answer. Comes closer, 15 feet away. Honey, what's for dinner tonight? No answer. 10 feet away, 5 feet away. Now asking for the fourth time. Honey, what's for dinner tonight? She still can't hear. So he comes really close to her and says, honey, what's for dinner tonight? And she says to him, now for the fifth time, we're having matzo ball soup. So how to speak so that people can listen is really a question that sometimes we should ask ourselves. Are we the ones maybe that are a little deaf? In fact, the Talmud says that only someone who has the fear of heaven is someone whose words can be heard. What the commentaries explain is that people who have the fear of heaven are people who are careful with their words because they know that God is watching. When you're careful with your words and you know exactly what words to say and more importantly what words to not say, then people listen to you. So that's prerequisite number one, always. I'll add a different prerequisite, and that is that sometimes words are not needed. Sometimes what's needed is silence. And therefore the question should be not how to speak so that people can listen, but how to be silent so that people can listen to your silence. You know that the famous French composer Claude Debussy wrote that the true music of any composition does not come from the notes, but it comes from the silence between the notes. That is also part of the speech, and the part of the speech that also is so lacking today. So silence is a virtue in and of itself. But if we really have to answer the question of how to speak so that people can listen, I really derive my inspiration from the last lecture of Moses. Now, a few years ago, you may remember in 2008, there was a professor who gave his last lecture. Do you remember that YouTube video? Yeah. Remember that? Just by the raise of the hand, who remembers that? It was a touching because it really went viral almost as quickly as this ice bucket challenge is going viral right now. But it was a stirring, a heart-wrenching lecture by a professor who knew he was going to die. He had cancer, and as is the custom in many colleges, he gave his last lecture, which is a lecture not on the topic that he taught at the university, but rather a lecture on life. And he dedicated his lecture not to the people in the hall, not to the 500 people who showed up on that day, but rather to his children, knowing that his children will grow up without a father. Just imagine the sign. But Moses also had a last lecture. And his last lecture is finding the very last words of the Torah. He's about to die. He's 120 years old. And then he's about to open his mouth for his last lecture. And instead of addressing the Jewish people, what does he say as his last lecture? Remember those words? Ha'azinu hashamayim va'adabera v'tishma ha'aretz imrefi. Listen, O heavens, and I will speak, and the earth also pay heed to my words. Is he addressing the people? Is he addressing the heavens and the earth? And is that what they were expecting of him to do? This is his last opportunity to say something to the nation, and he's speaking to the heavens and to the earth. What's happening here? It's really mind-boggling. Hazino Hashamayim, who's he referring to? Who's he speaking to? And for that we have to understand a story from the Talmud. A story from the Talmud that is just as bizarre. Because as you may know, the Talmudic era fell more or less during the same times as when the Greeks were at the center stage of the philosophical, intellectual world. The sages, the Talmudic sages, were actually parallel to that school of the Greeks, where Plato and Socrates and others were born. And during the Talmudic era, shortly before the destruction of the Second Temple, there was a grand debate between one of the most important sages, Rabbi Yehoshua, and the elders of Athens, as they are nicknamed in the Talmud, the sages of Athens. And that if you look at the conversation itself, the debate between the elders of Athens and Rabbi Yehoshua, you'll find that it's really an impossible debate. They're speaking about analogies, they're speaking about metaphors, no one can really understand and relate to their words. But Rabbi Yehoshua holds his ground, and he's able to answer back every analogy with his personal analogy. I'm going to speak about one of them today, but just a quick background. See, Rabbi Yehoshua was really one of the wisest sages. He made his living not from learning Torah, but really from charcoal. And that's why they said that he was always dirty from charcoal. Rabbi that was always dirty. He was also very ugly. And once he was approached by the daughter of the local governor, who said, "I can't believe how ugly you are." True story. And he replied, he said, "Well, I know that you think I'm ugly, and I agree with you, but I'm going to ask you just for the test, since you're a wise girl, go back to your father, the local governor. I know he has expensive wines. Why don't you ask him to keep those wines in gold, which is more befitting of a governor, not in these wooden utensils." The daughter of the governor said, "That's a good idea, you're right. We're from the high part of society, so let's go and put our wine in gold." After a few days, the governor came to his daughter and said, "What have you done to me? You've ruined my wines." "Why?" "So you put them in golden utensils and stuff, wooden utensils. Don't you know that makes the wine sour?" And then the daughter of the governor understood. She went back to Rabbi Yehoshua. He said, "I understand why you said that to me." He said, "Yes, indeed. You see, wisdom can only be retained in ugly utensils." But that was the wisdom of Rabbi Yehoshua. And there he has a debate between the elders of Athens, in which a fascinating analogy is brought. And over there, Rabbi Yehoshua has to answer back to the elders of Athens, who said, "What if you have a girl who has all of the characteristics that you wish, and she has really all the beautiful features that a person desires. She needs to get married. Yet, she cannot find her beloved. So, the question that the elders of Athens ask is, what should she do? What should she do? Should she aim for a very high counterpart? Or if she's not successful in that circle, should she go lower?" Rabbi Yehoshua, instead of answering the question, he takes a needle and places it very low on a wall, waits a few minutes, takes the needle out, and places it in the highest point of the wall. That was his answer. The elders of Athens had no answer to that, to this analogy. What was he saying? What's this needle that's been placed very low and then very high? Sorry? What?
He placed it in between.
In between? No, he placed it very, very high. Yeah.
Very high and very low. Any place in between.
Any place in between. Okay, so So to understand that, I really have to use the commentary of one of the great Hasidic masters. You see, you're all familiar with Abraham Joshua Heschel. So Abraham Joshua Heschel's great-great-grandfather was a Hasidic master, also named Abraham Joshua Heschel. And he was nicknamed the Abter Rav, the rabbi of Apt, because he came from the Hasidic dynasty of Apt in Poland. He actually was a Hasidic master who was known for his unconditional love to everyone, really to every human being. And therefore, he was also named Ohev Israel, which means the lover of the Jews. Filled with love. Before he passed away, as a side anecdote, he said to his followers who were standing by his deathbed, he said, look, my predecessor, Rabbi Levi Yitzchak of Berdichev, promised that when he gets to the gates of heaven, he will refuse to enter until God fulfills his promise and he brings the Messiah. Fortunately, they bribed him. They offered him many insights of Torah that he had never learned before. He was easily drawn towards those lights, and he forgot about his promise to the Jewish people. I will not forget that promise. That's what he said before he died. I care for you, I'm not leaving you, I'll bring you the Messiah. He also said before he died, I'm sorry I'm sidetracking, but he also said before he died that he knows that he doesn't quite deserve paradise, right? Paradise and hell. And that's a different discussion of what we really believe hell is in Judaism. It's very different than the Christian hell. But he said to his followers, I probably won't enter the Garden of Eden. I'll probably go to hell. But then God will have compassion on me. Because I will tell him that you know, God, that my entire life I've been careful to surround myself with only good people. So don't put me in hell. I'll be surrounded by not so good people. But I have a suggestion for you, God. Take all the bad people and put them in paradise and leave me alone in hell. I'll be just fine with that. But that's what he said. And that was, again, a glimpse into the unconditional love that he had for every human being. But Abter Rav answers both this debate and the question that we asked about Moses' last lecture in a fascinating way. And he says that really every human being is made of two facets. You have the facet of the heavens and you have the facet of the earth. Most people, when they communicate with others, they communicate towards the earth of the person, not the heaven. What is the earth? The earth is the side that is perhaps negative, not always joyful. It is our anxieties, our challenges, our obstacles, our other side, maybe even a dark side. But that doesn't define a person. Don't forget, there's a heaven in every human being. That heaven is his soul. That heaven is his potential. That heaven is the skills and the talents that God gives each person. Let's not forget about that. What was Moses saying to the Jewish people just before he passed away? Listen, O heavens, if you wish to live a meaningful life with yourselves, with each other, you have to pay attention first and foremost to the heavens, to the heaven in the other, not the earth. That's why he opened his lecture with the heaven. What was Rabbi Yehoshua doing with that needle? He said, if a woman was not able to find a counterpart, even though she might be the perfect lady, doesn't mean she must go lower. You can't take her needle and aim low. Aim even higher. You'll have even more, you'll find someone that will really fit her. Because if she's heaven, you have to aim for the heavens. If you aim for the heavens, then you'll find that perfect match. That was Rabbi Yehoshua's answer to the elders of Athens. And how true, my friends. Often we speak to others and they don't listen, and we wonder why. But the answer is very simple. We were speaking to the earth, not to the heavens. I'll never forget who speaks Yiddish here. I'll never forget my friends would share with me the term, a Yiddish term that they learned in their household. And correct me if I'm wrong, those who speak Yiddish. but a term that says as follows, es passt nicht. Right? Es passt nicht. And they would tell me that their parents would tell them es passt nicht each time they would do something not good. What does es passt nicht mean? The best translation I found, and please correct me again if I'm wrong, is it's unbecoming of you. In other words, we hold you to such a high standard. We see the heaven in you. Es passt nicht that you're dealing with the earth. It's unbecoming of you. Because what really defines you is your heaven, not your earth. And I dare say that I believe the reason why Americans so vividly remember that one line of John F. Kennedy during his inauguration in 1961, of ask not what your country can do for you, but ask what you can do for your country. Why do they remember that line? Why? I've been thinking about this for a long time. Why? I think it's simple. See, John F. Kennedy was relating to the heavens in Americans, to their potential, to what they can do. And that's struck a chord, a sensitive chord, a heavenly chord within us. And therefore we remember it. And therefore it is so appealing. Now, we stand here, and this is the topic that we chose just a few weeks before Yom Kippur. Because on Yom Kippur, we begin the prayer with some words that seem completely out of place. You remember that song? We all sing it, Kol Nidrei, right? The prayer of Kol Nidrei. We all flock to Kol Nidrei just to listen to the Chazan singing it. What do the words mean? Kol Nidrei means that we ask God to annul all of our vows. And then we say something that really doesn't belong in any Jewish textbook. We say, God, אנחנו מתירים להתפלל עם העבריינים. We allow ourselves to pray with the transgressors, with the Avaryanim. What? You allow yourself, first of all, who do you think you are? That's number one. Number two, you allow yourselves, thank you very much. Why don't you ask the authority from someone else? You allow yourselves. So yes, we always sing that the other is the transgressor. You know the story about this old man who's driving down the highway, he gets a phone call from his wife. His wife said, I just saw on TV, and you should be very, very careful because there's a crazy man who's driving opposite the traffic. And he answers, one crazy man, I see 1,000 of them. But we always think that the others are driving opposite the traffic, the transgressors. But it's a powerful story, really a powerful story. And a powerful prayer. Because it comes to speak of the three transgressors that we think we have around us, simply because we forget about the heavens. And I'll divide them into three. Transgressor number one is the unintentional one. Yes, the one that that transgresses many good things because he doesn't care much. I said they once asked someone what is the difference between apathy and ignorance, and he answered, I don't know and I don't care. Some people don't know and don't care, and therefore they transgress unintentionally. These are the people that perhaps are best symbolized by the small details of life. Small details that are often overlooked. You know that the prayer of Kol Nidrei, also as a side note, was instituted most probably by the Spanish Jews fleeing from the Inquisition, 1492, when they were forced to either convert or die. Many Jews decided to take upon themselves the laws of the land, the laws of Spain, and act as fully fledged Christians on the outside, but on the inside, they kept the Jewish traditions, right? They were called the Marranos. Now, by the way, there's a tribe until today in Mallorca, Spain, that calls itself the Marranos. And they say that they are descendants of the Marranos. In fact, how do you say, who's fluent in Spanish here? How do you say pig in Spanish?
Puerco.
Puerco? So I even think that they call themselves, I think it's a different word. Is there a different word for pig? But they even call themselves, and you can research that, pigs. Why? Because on the outside they ate ham, they ate pig, but on the inside they kept the Jewish traditions. Now, on Yom Kippur, these Jews would find themselves in a synagogue, secretly obviously, but they would go and purposely ask, where can I find a synagogue? And they would appear there. Why? Because something on the inside shouted, you're really a Jew. You know that. All these transgressions were unintentional. They were forced upon you. So come and pray. And therefore that line was added. Those are the Maramos. But then there's a second group of transgressors, which is the intentional ones. Yet even with those intentional transgressors, we have to, we must, we just for the sake of goodness in the world, we ought to look at the heavenly path. And I'm reminded of the story of Yosef Meshisa. Never the story, but it's really a soul-stirring story from the Talmud. Yosef Meshisa was a Jew who collaborated with the Romans during the destruction of the Second Temple. You see, when the Romans came to destroy the temple, they needed a tour guide. The temple was a big place. And they wanted to know exactly what the utensils were, what the expensive ones were, what the least expensive ones were, what the holy parts of the temple were, what the less holy parts of the temple. They needed a tour guide. Yosef Meshisa said to the Romans, I'll be your tour guide. No problem, I'll show you exactly where everything is. So he volunteered to join hands with the devil of the time, if you wish, to go against his brethren, to give them a tour. Gave them a tour. They were so thankful that at the end they told Yosef, you can pick for yourself anything you want. We'll let you have it. Yosef wasn't dumb. He said, I'm going to go for the menorah. The menorah is the most expensive item. He took the menorah with him outside, and then some Roman soldiers outside said, hey, stop, we think you took the most beautiful item. You can't just take that. Go get yourself something else. The menorah will stay with the Romans. Yosef Meshisa replied, no, I'm not going. He said, go. You can pick anything. We promise you this time we'll let you. No, I'm not going. Why are you not going? And he replied with a cry of his soul, because I have angered my God once, I will not anger him a second time. Now just imagine, this is a Jew again, joined hands with our staunchest enemy. And yet, there's a sensitivity in him. There's a soul in him that does not allow him to go inside the temple for a second time. The end of Yosef Meshisa was that they were so perturbed, the Romans were so perturbed by his reply. They said, what? Are you on our side or on their side? He said, I'm on my Jewish side. So they tortured him to death. Tortured him to death, and they did to him what they did to the American hostage yesterday. That was his hand. Intentional transgressors have souls too, have heavens too. And you never know when that heaven can awaken. I really stumbled upon a letter by the Lubavitcher Rebbe of blessed memory not too long ago that was written to Alan Dershowitz. In fact, I emailed Alan Dershowitz to confirm that it was right. He said it's 100% true. And the story is, but Alan Dershowitz once wrote to the Lubavitcher Rebbe about Jesse Helms. Some of you may remember Jesse Helms, who was a Republican candidate who was very anti-Israel at the beginning of his career. Very anti-Israel. And he signed bills that were really detrimental to Israel. Yet, the Lubavitcher Rebbe honored Jesse Helms in one of his galas. Alan Dershowitz, the advocate of Israel, was furious. So he wrote a letter to the Lubavitcher Rebbe saying, how dare you honor someone like that? And the Rebbe answered back in this letter, it's worth reading. You Google it. And he says to him, you will never know when a person awakens from his negativities. In 1984, Jesse Helms became a staunch advocate for Israel. Why? Because there was one person in the world one true leader that believed in his heaven. Now you may say it's far-fetched, but don't give up on that. If it is your own child, you won't give up. So why not with other human beings? That's intentional transgression. Then you have people who can't even be placed in the first or the second category. They just simply, what the Maimonides calls them, he defines them as tinokot shenishbu, which means babies who were captured at a very tender age. They grew up differently. They are completely unaffiliated, I would say. Completely and it's not their fault. Can't blame them. It's not that they're doing it intentionally or unintentionally, they don't even fall into those categories. In fact, not too long ago, a few years ago, I'll never forget, but the Sochnut, the Israeli Sochnut, came up with a call on the eve of Passover, and they asked, I think something that should be done every single year, but they asked every Jewish family to add one more seat to their Passover table. Why? For the Jew that's not there. The Jew that falls into that third category. The fifth son, they call it. 4 sons, but there's also a fifth one. And I'll categorize that son, or that fifth son, by a story that occurred to me about 2 years ago. I was in a debate between an ultra-Orthodox rabbi. I see you thought I was Orthodox, but there's ultra-Orthodox. So there's between an ultra-Orthodox rabbi, myself, and a conservative rabbi. And at the very end of the debate, there were many questions. I'll give you an example of a question. All of them were loaded questions. One question was, the question is for you, Rabbi Alush. Yes, do you believe in conservative Judaism? And I said to myself, I'll play with the crowd a little bit. Do I believe in conservative Judaism? No, I simply don't. And I heard some hush-hush from the crowd. I said, but neither do I believe in Reform Judaism. Nor do I believe in Orthodox Judaism. And let's make the question a little more severe. Was Moses Orthodox, conservative, or Reform? What was he? He's a Jew. I believe in Judaism alone, without any labels. Labels are for meat packing. But that was one question. The other question was from a different woman who stood up and said, Rabbi, I speak for 90% of the Jewish people today. 90% of the Jewish people today are completely unaffiliated, completely assimilated. We do not know what the Shema means, and we do not know what Israel means. I have a question. Do you think, for all 3 rabbis, do you think that when the Messiah will come, he will welcome us? Ultra-Orthodox rabbi said, well, God will have mercy. And of course, that instigated the crowd even more. What do you mean? And then he went on to say atrocious things, which I can't even repeat, about why the Holocaust happened and so on. Then thankfully it was the conservative rabbi's turn, which gave me a little more time to think. And the conservative rabbi said, well, yes, God will welcome you as he will welcome every Jew. The Messiah will welcome you as he will welcome every Jew. He might ask you to take upon yourselves a few things, but he will welcome you. And I said to myself, well, what can I answer? And for some reason God does this sometimes, but he pops things in your mind. And I thought of the Midrash that says that Moses was given a glimpse into the future before he passed away. And then he saw our generation, the generation before the coming of the Mashiach. He saw the last generations. And when he saw the last generations, the Midrash says, his face turned red. Nitkalkemu panav shel Moshe in Hebrew. God said to him, what's happening? And Moses says, I see the trials. I see the obstacles. I see the temptations that this generation is going through. If I were in that generation, I will never be able to withstand anything. So I envy them. I'm embarrassed because I'm not at that level. So I said to this lady, you know what God will do to you, what the Messiah will do to you? He will give you the warmest hug. He will be so jealous of you as Moses was jealous of you. And He will see your heaven and hold it to the highest standard. And shine it so that it serves as a beacon of light and of inspiration to the world. That's what He will do. And I entirely believe in this. It's all a question of communication. How do we see others? Do we see the heavens? Do we see the earth? If we see the heavens, they will listen to us. I can promise you that. Try it on your children, try it on your spouses, and try it even on yourselves. You relate to yourself as a heavenly person, yourself will follow through. You relate to yourself as an earthly person, you might crash. And I'm using the word crash because, as some of you may know, my father's an aeronautical engineer, and he gave us some life lessons from aeronautics. I actually asked him to publish that book of life lessons. He's working on it. For the past 30 years, but he's working on it. But there's a concept in aeronautics that relates to the landing of a plane. And the concept is called crabbing. Is anyone familiar with it? Go. Yeah, that's right. Go for it.
Well, yeah. A crab is when your flight through the air is not exactly parallel to your flight over the ground. So the plane actually appears to fly over the ground at an angle.
Right.
And
exactly.
It's used to maintain your ground position when there's a crosswind blowing. So you kind of come to the runway in this crab, and then you, right at the end, you use a rudder to keep the plane straight and drop it on the ground.
Very good. So if the plane needs to land east, and there's a very strong opposing wind, you actually have to go against the wind so that it carries you towards your landing. Otherwise, if you just aim for east, you'll go south. You'll land south. You'll miss the landing. And he said to us, as young children, I'll never forget, he said, you see, that's the way it is in life sometimes. If you just aim east, you'll crash. You have to aim north. Let that wind carry you. Let that heaven carry you. And then you'll land. Then you'll fulfill your purpose. And as Viktor Frankl would say, Viktor Frankl, who was really one of the greatest thinkers of psychology, really revolutionized the psychology world in the past century, he would say that if you speak to a person as he seems to be, he will refuse to listen. But if you speak to a person as his potential is, then he will always listen. And it is so true. That's because we are speaking to the heavens. I'll conclude just with a story. A story that occurred not too long ago. I happened to stumble on it too. By the way, everyone's forwards me stories. If you have good stories, forward them to me. I assemble them. But a story about a young teacher in Oklahoma. I haven't verified the story, but according to Snopes.com, there's a website where you can verify the story, whether it's true or not. So you go to Snopes.com and then you enter it, and they'll tell you whether it's true or not. There's a story that says that it's true on Snopes.com about Yitzhak Perlman, the violinist. When he was in town, I went to ask him whether it is true. He said, no, it's not true, but it's a good story. A story about him, about Yitzhak Perlman. So it means that everything that's on Snopes.com is not always also true. But there's a story that's verified by Snopes.com, whatever that means. And a story about a young teacher in Oklahoma who took over a very troubled class, a very, very troubled class. Any teacher who would go to that class would resign after a week or two. Her very first day in class, she approaches the students, and as they looking at each other, saying to each other, how long is this teacher going to last? She says to them, I am so excited to teach your class. I said, what? She says, I see a bunch of very bright children here. They got all excited. She immediately was able to speak to their heart and capture them. She lasted the entire year. To make a long story short, The principal was amazed at her achievement. You're the only teacher in so many years that has lasted with this class for an entire year. How did you do it? And she replied quite amazingly. That's why I think it's not so true. But she replied quite amazingly. She said, well, when you gave me the list of the students in my class, I saw the numbers next to them and I said, wow, they all have very high IQs. So I thought that this is a very bright class, and I told it to them. And the principal said, God, those weren't numbers of their IQ. Those were the numbers of the lockers. But what a beautiful mistake. What a life-saving, life-transforming mistake. My friends, sometimes we look at numbers and we think that they belong to lockers. We look at others and we put them in lockers. And sometimes we ought to look at others and see their IQ, their EQ, their soul Q, and know that those Qs are very up high in heaven. And if we do so, I promise your words will be listened to. Thank you very much. Okay, we'll take some questions, and again, the questions can be on any topic, really, not necessarily what we spoke about today, but on any topic. Anyone? Fine, I said silence is a virtue. All right. Yes.
They just ask time.
Well, you know what? Why don't we do this? When you ask your question, say your name, like this, everyone can see you and know you. Okay.
There are just certain people that are evil. How do you get around it? Because I've been led to believe there's always some bit of goodness in your person. And the ultimate example is, I don't have to mention his name.
Yeah. Look, first of all, I agree that there are some people that are evil, completely, entirely evil, but there are very few. Very few. What? Oh, I'm sorry. How do you deal with people that are entirely evil? How can you speak to them? Right? That's the question, Louis.
Yeah.
I agree that there are people who are entirely evil, but very, very few. I don't think we get to meet them. Maybe politicians get to meet them and others. But no, that's okay. But we don't get to meet them. But I'll answer the way Rabbi Shneur Zalman of Liadi, another Hasidic master, wrote a book called the Tanya, which is really the philosophy of many Hasidic teachings. The way he answers. In chapter 32 in that book, the book of the Tanya, he says something quite astonishing. He says, when we encounter people with evil, listen to this carefully. He says, we have to hate the bad in them, but love the good in them. It's very hard to do. Very hard to do. You have to hate the bad. And your hating of the bad is really because it's bad. Because you're seeking goodness and you're seeking even to transform that bad. So you first have to identify this bad. You have to hate the bad, but love the good. Now, yes, some people, I would say terrorists are entirely evil. No doubt. Those who come those who have murdered Jews are entirely evil. I don't think there's any heaven in them. Not because when they were 2-year-olds, they don't have any heaven. I think they did. Mm-hmm. Let's take the most extreme example. And forgive me if you disagree. I don't think Hitler at the age of 1 year old was a bad person. In fact, maybe even as he grew up as an artist, he wasn't such a bad person at the age of 9, the age of 10. But then he became bad. He became so bad that bad completely conquered him. He became entirely evil. That evil we have to hate. No doubt. So King David says, Ohavei Hashem sinu ra. Those who love God should hate bad. If you love God, you love what He loves and you hate what He hates. So you have to hate bad. But most people, the people that we interact with on our daily lives, are people that have heaven in them. And if you see some bad, hate the bad, love the good, and relate to it. Yes?
So, Alan's my name. So let's take it to a different subject. So if we apply what you said, then why is there divorce?
Okay, well, if I knew the answer, I would probably be a best-selling Dr. Phil.
I didn't say it's not an easy question.
Why is there divorce? It's a very general question. I mean, every case is different, right? Some people divorce one thing, other people divorce for other things. But divorce in general, where is it rooted from? Very often, I don't know if very often, I do marriage counseling, but it's because we don't relate to the heaven and earth. We really don't. And it's because also there's not much silence in the marriage. See, I often say that, no, in a good way, in a very good way. It's like the husband who comes and is approached by his wife in the morning and says, you don't stop speaking in your sleep. You don't stop speaking in your sleep. Stop it already. He says, well, if you would let me speak during the day, I would. No, but there's not much silence in There's not much silence in the sense that there's really not much listening. In order to listen, you need silence. I often say to young couples that if you think you've hit the jackpot and you're all in love, and then you go to the local park and you sit on a bench, and what bothers you, what gives you that feeling of awkwardness, is that silence. You have nothing to say to each other, and all of a sudden you feel awkward. You're really not in love. Nothing is being able to be with each other in complete silence, and not feel awkward. Feel completely at peace. And I think that derives from our heavenly ear and our heavenly eye. But otherwise, every case is different, obviously. Every case is different. And there are some cases of divorce that are not because of that. There are some cases of divorce that are tragic. Tragic. I'll give you a few examples, but I'm not going to bore you. Yeah, I'll tell you this. I mean, I usually very much discourage divorce. Very much discourage divorce. And very, very seldom have I told people that they have to divorce. And the reason for that is because I don't believe much in divorce if that heavenly side is expressed. But if it is expressed and it still doesn't work, then maybe divorce can come into play. So if that answers the question. No? Good try. All right, okay. We'll be here for good hours. Full answer. You know, just to relate to divorce, the Hebrew word for divorce is garesh, girushin. Girushin doesn't mean divorce in Hebrew. It means to expel. That's what I mean, to expel. Judaism doesn't believe in divorce. Doesn't believe in divorce. Divorce happens because you expel each other. If you would have enough love to embrace each other, in most cases, there wouldn't be a divorce, there wouldn't be an expel. But again, it depends. It depends. Really depends. Every case is different. Every marriage is a whole world in and of itself. Really a whole world in and of itself. I'll tell you this, just to end on the bright side. But you know that we often think of the bashert, that we have to marry a bashert, our destined one, right? Heard this all the time. But they don't tell you that the Zohar, the book of Kabbalah, explicitly says that there could be more than 3 bashurts. So that doesn't tell you that, but that's what it says. Doesn't mean that you have to marry one person. Maybe if that doesn't work, maybe you go to the second bashurt. No, maybe that person you thought was your bashurt was not your bashurt, and really the third bashurt is the bashurt of all. Really never know. It says at least 3, which means it could be 4 or 5.
Ask Hollywood, they know.
But please, polygamy is illegal in this country.
One bashert at a time, huh?
Yeah. Anything else? Any other questions? Yes?
So, my name is Shelley. It's easier to talk to the heaven in somebody else if I'm in my own heaven, but sometimes when I most need to talk to somebody else, that's not where I'm at in the moment. Do you have any suggestions for how to regroup when, like, if I get heated about something, I'm not in a very heavenly space?
Yes, I'll give you a suggestion that I learned from Elie Wiesel. Elie Wiesel, as we all know, is really one of the most respected Jews today. Elie Wiesel is a student who's my friend. His name is Chaim Ben Amur in Miami Beach. I visited him not too long ago. And he took out, there's a complete surprise to me, he took out about 600 letters of responses that he had received from Elie Wiesel. Every letter is rich in content. And then I bumped into this letter in which Elie Wiesel gives him an advice for writing. And he says to him, whenever you write a piece, a manuscript, whatever it may be, when you finish writing it, put it in your drawer, don't look at it, don't think about it for about 2-3 days. After 2-3 days, take it out of your drawer and look at it again. And you might think that it's great, you might think that it was terrible, and you have to tear it. That's what Elie Wiesel writes to my friend, his student. I think it's true for life. I think very often when we're in that spur of moment of heat, then we react in a negative way. And sometimes all that is needed is to pause. I do that with food. I really do that with food. I think that's the genius in blessings before food. I think the fact I see it with my children, I teach them to say the blessing over the food. They don't understand what they're saying. But I still very much believe in it. You know why? Because it gives them a few seconds to think. Maybe it will teach me how to eat, not to eat with such passion and enthusiasm. Or maybe not to eat what I'm eating, what I'm planning to eat. Maybe I should be eating something else. Maybe not to eat the quantity that I want. So when you have that urge, you pause it, put it in the drawer, and then you come back to it. When you come back to it, it will be much easier to relate to the heaven and earth. Yeah. Good question. Yes.
Hi, my name is Kathy.
Hi, Kathy.
And I'm wondering, when you're looking for the heaven in someone else so that you can reach them, and that's assuming that your intentions are pure and that you truly do wish to reach them and not just manipulate them. But how do you look for the heaven in someone when you perhaps don't know them well, or their heaven is hidden pretty deep within?
Can you repeat it?
Yes, how do you look in the heaven in someone when you barely know them, or when the heaven is deep within, can't really, is concealed? I think that's where silence comes into play. See, Michelangelo is known to have carved King David. When he carved King David, he said it very explicitly that he didn't carve King David from a stone, but rather he saw King David in the stone. All he had to do is reveal King David. I think you need to be an artist to see the hidden heaven within a person. So if you don't see it, instead of working on that person, work first on yourself. And if you're unable to relate to the heaven in the person because your artistic talents are not developed enough, then wait till you develop them. I don't think it's wise. I don't think any interaction that is an earthly interaction is usually not a productive one or an effective one. So rather not interact altogether. Work on your artistic talents and then go become the Michelangelo that you are. Anyone else? No? Amy, did you want to include the...
I just want to thank you very much.
Thank you.